Shalom, and welcome to another scintillating edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamit in Highland Park at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry J. Chesler, Solomon-Check, the Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, speaking to us from New York City, the Anshe Chesed in New York City. We are, as I said, we're the three most famous Parsha talkers on the internet. You know, there's a physiotherapist. They're called Brad and Bob. It's a very funny YouTube thing. They go, the two most famous physiotherapists on the internet. In our own mind, that is. So we're in our own mind.
My congregation is the three old guys talking Torah. That's what it is.
We're the three guys, old. Yeah, okay.
Oldish.
Yeah, look, you know, we can go into the identity thing. All right, amazing Parsha this week. This is, you know, if you had to pick a Parsha that's filled with material to talk about, it's Vayera. Of course, we could say that about almost every Parsha except maybe Mitzorah. I don't know. Or
we'd say Mitzorah is just oozing with things to talk about.
Okay, this Parsha, it opens with the visitors coming to visit Abram after his circumcision. We're not going to talk about that right now. And the Sodom and Gomorrah event, and before the Sodom and Gomorrah, the news to what happened to Barry.
No, I didn't.
As we were saying before, that look, the Parsha is filled with stuff. You know, the report to the news to Avram that he's going to have a child. Okay, and we can go into all of these things, and they're rich, beautiful stories. But we do want to focus on Akedat Yitzchak, and it's called the binding of Isaac. And I look, I'm just going to go right there and say, what's the most important point in the story? What's the most important moment in the story? Okay, so I'm gonna put out this for you to argue with me and say, I believe that the most important point in the story is not the lifting up of the ma'achelet, the slicing device, the eating thing, the knife, the slaughtering tool. I think the most important moment in the story is Vayakod et Yitzchak beno. I'm sorry to our listeners, we haven't built this up into the crescendo that it needs to be built up into. Okay, but here's the moment. The point is that he's let the two boys stay, somewhere at the base of the hill. He's up at the top of the hill. He's put he's made his altar. He's put the wood in the altar. He is setting aside the fire. The text doesn't tell you exactly where he puts the fire, but it's clear that the wood is not lit. And he then binds Isaac, Vayakod et Yitzchak beno, okay? And then it tells us, Vayishlach et yado vayikach et ha'ma'achelet. He takes his hand and he, go ahead, Barry, you're going to.
The main moment. The main moment is Vayasem oto al mizbeach. He had to tie him before he would get on the altar.
Read it again. I'm sorry.
So at the end of verse 9, it's
your sound is bad. Just a second. Let me go to it. I'll do this. So verse. What's your verse?
9.
9. Okay. Vaikach Avraham et atzei olah is verse 7. He takes the wood. Vayasema Yitzchak beno. Okay. He puts it on Isaac. They walk together. He says, "Where is the lamb?" And here is the fire and the wood. Where is the lamb for the offering? God will provide. Adonai Elohim yireh lo haseh leolah, which is a really, really, really important verse here that Abraham's saying. They go together. Verse 9. They go to the place. Asher amar lo Elohim, that God said. Vayiven sham Avraham hamizbech. He builds the altar. Vayaroch et ha'itzim. He lays out the wood. Vayakod et Yitzchak beno. He binds Isaac.
Right, and then Vayasem oto al mizbeach. Only then does he put him on the altar. He has to tie him up before he could get him on the altar.
Yes, and I'm saying that the tying is the most important moment. Okay, I'm going to back my case up with the following: the word vayakod appears nowhere else in the Bible. You may say that that's an issue. I think that's an issue. That's not an issue. I think it's an issue. Okay, it's a singular word. It is probably the center of the text, okay, the focal point of the text. It is the most extraneous element in the whole story, okay? Because if he is going to slaughter his son, then why does he need to buy it? We know of no other situation in any animal sacrifice where the animal is bound, okay? So why does he bind him? And the reason why is because he'd run away. And it's the moment that he binds him, that's when the relationship between Avram and Yitzchak is severed. He has to do it stealthily. He has to exert power over him. He has to subdue him. And it doesn't matter if Isaac is 7 or 37 here. This is the moment of personal physical contact. And this is where the rupture is. This is the traumatic moment.
It's also a theological rupture, because what's going to come out of this is the appellation for the God of Isaac is Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Isaac, because Isaac's association with God is fear, not the fear of awe, but the fear of being petrified.
Say that again. Your sound is bad. Not the fear of awe.
It's not the fear of awe, but of being petrified.
Like Pachad Yitzchak is not reverential attitude towards heaven. It's like, oh my God, this
he wants to kill me.
Who's trying to kill me.
Right. Okay.
And it's God as well as Abraham who's trying to kill Isaac, from Isaac's perspective.
Yeah. So I really hadn't thought about the observation that you just made, that other sacrifices aren't tied to the altar. And by the way, and this illustrates what you're saying. I have a different verse, by the way, that I think is the most important, but we'll hold that for the moment. It illustrates very well what you're saying. The physical, Abraham presumably had to, like, maybe even overpower a resistant child. And the physical, like, there's the famous trolley problem, right? Yes. The trolley out of control is, if you throw the switch, it'll kill one person. If you let it to run its course, it'll kill 5 people. Everybody says, of course you should throw the switch, kill one person and save the 5. And then they tweak this hypothetical, and one of them is, well, what if you have to push a person onto the track to stop the trolley? That will kill the one person and save the 5. And although people typically will always say, yes, throw the switch, that eventuating in the death of 1 and not 5, but nobody will say, yes, push the person onto the track. Either imagine them standing on a bridge over top, push the person onto the track. And I think that the reason that nobody ever says to do that, when they run this kind of what's called experimental philosophy, like, ask people really what their ethical intuitions are, is that the idea of physically putting your hands on another body and causing its death is just unthinkable. And so the thought of tying up Isaac is really illustrative of what you're saying. And I never thought of this before. And I also never thought, when the Torah imagines, or at least as our sages interpret it, that you sacrifice an animal, like, there's the lamb too, Shnei Kvasim, and Yom HaShabbat, Shnei Kvasim, B'nei Shana Tamimim, you take the 2 lambs for the Shabbat Musaf sacrifice. They don't kill them on the altar. They kill them in the other room.
Exactly. So I can push my thesis in another direction, which is, there's everything wrong in this story, okay? He does everything wrong, and the whole story is a delaying tactic, okay? There's nothing in this story that accords with the normal way you sacrifice, okay? I'm going to say this, for all this, I watched this guy, Wilderness Cooking. It's on YouTube, Wilderness Cooking. So I've learned everything I need to know about, how lambs and sheep are taken and slaughtered or whatever. And he's happy to pull a lamb out of the flock. He takes the lamb and, goes off the camera for a few minutes, and he comes back with a carcass, okay? I'm enthralled by this. Why? Because it's like normal, okay? There's nothing normal here. In a normal sacrifice, the fire is burning all the time, okay? You just don't start the fire after you slaughter it, because as anyone who's ever barbecued anything knows, it takes a long time to get the coals hot, okay? And he has to then, he understands that if he slaughters his son, right? And if he, as absurd as that's going to sound, he's going to linger there. That's ridiculous. He doesn't want to do this. This is the thesis that I'm proposing. He does not want to do this. He does mean it when he says that God will provide the animal. He knows that God doesn't want him to do this, okay? Because God is not a bloodthirsty, cruel, and obscene and immoral God, okay? So the test is perfect because it pits him against God, who is asking him to do an irrational moral thing, and it pits him against his son, and he has to do something. And he has to save God for God's reputation, I think, because if this were to be carried out according to the way God instructed or God challenges him, there would be no Judaism. This is not a Judaism that we would live by.
Why is it then that he's stopped by the angel and not by God himself?
I think it's a very good question. It's a puzzle for me. So I haven't completely worked this out in the sense that the angel comes as a messenger, and why it would be that God doesn't do this himself, right? Let's look at the verse, right? The angel says,
11.
In verse 11, so why you're saying it should be God himself that's saying this?
Well,
right?
I have two possible things about this. One, it turns on, one is kind of like, modern scientific shot, which is that we sometimes see that a malach of God, and it means God. Yes, the word messenger obviously is some sort of separation, but Moses in the burning bush also sees a malach, but we know it's God. So I would say that in the range of biblical styles of expression, it is sometimes the case that a malach really does mean.
Okay, so
God.
if you want to go in that direction, then what we can imagine is it's one of the three malachim from the beginning of the Parsha that's talking to him. And that would unite both the beginning and the end of the Parsha.
That would be very good.
I'm going to go.
I got another one too, which is that the story, and this is also a modern scientific shot, but with much more midrashic richness, which is that Elohim was the word for the first rounds of the story. Elohim nisat Avraham, Elohim yir Elo haseh, and then it becomes Shem Hashem. It becomes Yud Hey Vav Hey here in this latter part of the story, and we typically associate Elohim with Midat Hadin, the judgmental, harsher powers of the divine, and Yud Hey Vav Hey with Midat Harachamim, mercy. In which case, you might have a story in which Din is prominent in the beginning, the command of sacrifice, this unimaginable command of violence, and Hashem has to come in to save in the rescue, because we really need a shift.
Okay, I'm going to go a different direction here and say that this moment is also the rupture of their relationship. It's the rupture of the relationship between Abraham and Isaac, and that's what Yoram Hazony in his book, The Philosophy of the Hebrew Scripture, I have it right here. Okay, very, very important book. All right, so his take on this is that it's not Isaac that is being sacrificed, it's the relationship between Abraham and Isaac that is being sacrificed. And number two, it is in this precise moment that there is a bit of a rupture between God and Abraham. We've all noticed this, that after the Akedah, there is no more speaking directly to Abraham. Sure, God will bless Abraham. God will bless Abraham, but God will not speak to Abraham. If you were to ask me, could you locate the moment when the connection is broken, when the broken telephone, the broken wire, it's this moment. Why? And so the best I can do here is because it's embarrassing to God to have to face Abraham. Okay? Because
what does that make of the religion then?
what? So I'm going to ask the question the other way, which is, what would it have made of the religion if he went through it? It would not be a religion that you or I would want to be a part of. Okay,
that's a question you can ask though. Even with okay, if he'd gone through it, it would have been worse. But the same question is still a relevant and apposite question to what you just described, which is that God in that scenario was very powerful. You know, the way you present it is very powerful. And there's a lot of depth in there, but you still have to ask yourself, how is it that God sets up a situation in which it destroys a parental-child relationship and then becomes embarrassed? God becomes embarrassed before Abraham that either A, Abraham was so fanatical that he was willing to do it when he should have resisted, or B, God destroyed human relationship. I don't believe in a God that destroys human relationship. And C, now God and Abraham can't talk anymore. Why did God do anything in the first place?
So you're getting me chuckling now. Okay, in the Midrash, I'm going to call it the Rem. Okay, Rabbi Elliot Malamet, the Midrash HaRem. The story is not over. Okay. And the story is not over for any one of us, okay? That the story of Abraham and God is a story that's filled with both the desire, like we talked about last week, that God loves Abraham, and it's also a story of great pain, and that the unwritten chapter of the story is rapprochement. It's a story of how do I have to forgive him, and he has to forgive me. Look. This is what he's asking. God is asking to sacrifice his son, okay? So what ends up happening is that he destroys his relationship with his son. We are all parents, okay? There is nothing more precious to us in the world than our relationship with our children. If that was being asked of us in order to create a nation, in order to serve, in order to have God's presence in the world, it would be a hard ask. And I don't think that any one of us could really we are not great, okay? But Avram succeeds in doing that, okay? And that's painful, and that's so viscerally painful, and there's a wound there, and that relationship needs to be repaired. And so I did this on Rosh Hashanah, and it's still fresh in my mind. In the play acting of the relationship, it's there's atonement that needs to happen. There needs to be in the story after the story. It's how are we going to be together, me and you, God? And that's where I can say to people, especially people who have gone through terrible, terrible things in their lives, do you think maybe you need to forgive God? That's all. It's an audacious thing to say. It's almost impossible to say, but there's some truth in that, in the sense that when people feel so crushed, they often blame God, and maybe
right,
God.
But Elliot, I would make two comments here. First of all, when the angel appears again, he says, "I will bless your seed, and you'll become like the stars of the heavens." But that doesn't happen. In other words, there's no resolution for Abraham, because the multiplication of his seed is really through Keturah. Right, in his lifetime. It's not through either Hagar or through Sarah. And what is one supposed to make of that?
Right. What I make of that.
And then, since you mentioned the Yamim Norim, the high holidays, what does that do to our concept of Zechut Avot? If this is the relationship that ends between God and Abraham.
No, I think Zechut Avot, the merit of the fathers. Okay, so. Here, this is an extraordinary act that Avram does. Avram is the exceptional individual who will do this, and it's because the way that Jewish liturgy uses this moment is we basically put that in front of God. We say, God, look what he was able to do. Look what he was willing to do for you. Okay, because he was willing to do that for you, and because he did that for you, you do this for us. That's Zechut Avot, and I'm totally with that liturgy. Okay, I'm reading it in a sense. This is a consolation prize for him. I seriously, when you get into the story, you want to in its depth, in what it demands of us, is to rip out our hair. It demands impossible emotional involvement. This is not a cartoon. This is not like a painting. This is the reason why this works is because we often have to put everything on the line. We were talking just before we started recording, the sacrifice of children still goes on. How does it still go on? Because parents still sacrifice their children they send them out to war to defend the nation. Look, we deal with this on a regular basis. If we follow closely, things in Israel. Israel experiences wars. Israel experiences terror, and the victims of terror, the soldiers who died defending Israel, they're called korbanot. Literally sacrifices. That may be a more of a phenomenon of the way that language has evolved for us. Fine, but the point is that this drama of sacrifice still goes on today. And the question is, the reason why the story resonates so powerfully is because on some level we can at least think of how it relates to civilization.
There's a lot of reasons why this story works so well, and it's important not to go without mentioning that this is the sublime height of biblical prose narrative. I mean, the writing of it is just incomparably wonderful, in very, very spare details, much more implied beneath the surface than ever, brought into explicit expression. It works because, as we all say, the parents, we do have this feeling of endangering our children, risking our children, losing our children, and that's a huge grip on the human heart. I think it also works on the dimension of the infinite demands. I think in the main, I don't really read Bible characters as real people. We don't really know like who's funny or who has a bad temper or who's tall or who's short. The Bible doesn't tell us about people. They tell us about great situations. And this is a story about an impossible demand. Impossible demand, and how it is that you handle the tragic elements of destroying your human relationships and destroying your divine relationships. I think that part is all really powerful. My candidate for most important line, I mean, there's a way in reading the story, and you can, basically we're talking about it now, but that Isaac is a little bit of a prop. This is really about Abraham's test, about how Abraham will respond to this impossible divine demand. But there's also an element in which, I want to bring in Isaac as more than a prop. There's a great poem on the high holidays that's often said, mostly in Sephardic, but it's really great. I try to bring in Et Sharei Ratzon Lehipateach. This is the time of opening up the gates of Ratzon, of will, divine favor and will. And the stanzas always end with Ha'oked, Ha'ne'ekad, V'Hamizbeach. Okay, the binder and the bound and the altar. Three characters, as it were. We can make the third character the ram, but the binder and the bound. So to me, if I want to bring in Isaac as more than a prop, I'm going to go with the line that when he first says, and the repetition of Avi and Beni, my father, my son. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham Aviv. And Isaac says to his father Abraham, calling to mind that relationship, verse 7, 22:7. He says to his father, it says to Abraham Aviv, he says to his father, but it doesn't say what he says. And then he just says, Vayomer Avi, and he says, my father, again, tugging on your heartstrings. Child saying to parent, father, are you still my father? Are you really my father? Abraham replies, Vayomer Hineni Beni, here I am, my son. The son says, there's the fire, there's the wood, where's the animal? Abraham Elohim Yireh Haseh, God will find his own lamb, le'olah b'ni,
for the sacrifice,
for the offering. Vayelchu shnehem yachdav.
Bingo.
The two of them go together, which I think in that very, very spare moment, Elohim Yireh Haseh, God will find his own lamb. Isaac has to understand that he's the lamb, and they walk together. Isaac goes on with a certain with a resignation and his own measure of devotion.
Okay, so the reason why I'm shaking my head here is because I really believe that he believes that this is what's going to happen, and that's where it becomes the test of his faith. He believes that God is not going to do it. I agree with everything you said, by the way, about that they walked off together, and that the story itself builds and strengthens and magnifies the relationship between the two of them. That's the center tragic moment. Okay, but when he says exactly what he says, which is God will provide the offering, it's not a lie. This is how
it is a lie.
No.
Because he doesn't say God will provide the offering.
God will see.
God will provide the sheep.
No, God will provide. Yes. Okay. So it's
Urelo said.
I'll explain.
No. So, and again, I think we have to see this in light of what we've already seen earlier in the Parasha, where Abraham says things that are not true.
No. So the reason why I'm disagreeing with you so strongly is because he names the place based on the fact that what he predicted happened. Okay, he calls the place, right,
Adonai Yireh.
Adonai Yireh, because that's exactly the miracle that happened. He was predicting it. It's, as Hazoni says, it's the most overlooked piece of the text. Right?
Well, how do you understand? How do you understand Adonai Yireh?
God will see, and that's exactly what happened. Okay,
but what does he see?
He saw to it that there would be an animal.
No, he saw Abraham.
He saw it's okay. Double meaning. God provided the animal, and God saw
it there. So Abraham is saying, "See, God, I did what you asked me."
No, it's not only that.
Well, that's what the words say, Elliot.
He says it before. He says God will provide, and of course, this becomes the place where people will be seen. Yes. And
well, so wait a second. I got a couple of objections here. Number one,
go ahead.
The enigmatic quality of the divine seeing and appearance is quite complicated, because it is. In verse 8, it said, Adonai Yireh lo haseh, which I translated as God will find his own offering. God will see to it that he's, but when it comes down to 14, where this actually happens, Vayikra Abraham Shema Komahu Adonai Yireh, not Elohim, and now again we switch to Adonai. Abraham calls the name of the place God will see. Asher Ye Amer Hayom, as it is said nowadays in some sort of apparently common expression, Behar Adonai Yera'eh, which could mean either God appears in the mountain, or he appears in the mountain of God. I don't know exactly which, but it doesn't unambiguously mean, and God saw to it, it worked out great. I think God is appearing there. But now here's my main thing. We are all aware, our listeners are no doubt aware, or should be aware, that a very prevailing midrashic tradition has that Abraham is not stopped at the last minute. Abraham goes through with it, and Isaac dies and is resurrected. And that is a midrashic tradition, midrashic understanding that really, really, really caught fire, it caught the Eish and the Eitzim of the hearts of the Jewish people, and not just them, because that's the Christian story. The Christian story is that the beloved Son died and was resurrected. I think that both the ancient rabbis and the ancient Christians understood that this story, it might be disaster narrowly averted in the way that you said, that Abraham always knew that disaster was going to be averted, and he had the faith to go on with it because he knew it was going to come out okay. And there's a great cogency and power to that interpretation. But I also think that the other interpretation has its own great cogency and power, which says God demands impossible things, and sometimes people even go through with it, but in very rare and fabulous and providential circumstances, God saves us from our own carrying it through to the full out extent.
Okay, so I don't want to say I reject that. That's too arrogant, whatever. I want to say it doesn't captivate me. It doesn't captivate me because I almost want to say there's something much more, quote, real about the way things happen in real time here in the story than the death and resurrection, which I interpret it's very Christian, and I think the rabbis are trying to argue against the Christian reading of it.
How can they be arguing against it? They in fact adopt the same, and I'm not saying that the rabbis are imitating Christianity. I think that both of them are drawing on a kind of esoteric reading of the Torah that goes back to very ancient times.
I think it's just not. It doesn't become a normative way that we.
A question, Elliot.
Yes.
It seems that your reading makes Abraham greater than God.
I don't have a problem with that.
But I understand that you don't, but it seems that the religion does.
You want it darker.
No,
here I am.
Because what does God want? God wants Abraham to be as full as a human being as possible, okay? And maybe God loses here, okay?
So let's take your reading then. And so what is the lesson we take away from it?
What's the lesson? The lesson.
Why is it in the Torah?
Look, the reason it's in the Torah is to break our hearts, and the reason it's in the Torah is to tell us to what direction Abraham went in order to found this people, and what he was able to do, which none of us, I think, is able to do, which is one of my questions on this is this a normative archetype for normal religious behavior? And the answer is no, absolutely not. I am not asked to do this, okay? But the founder of my people, the founder of our people did do this. And that's what makes it very, very exceptional, right? Nobody else is going to be asked to do this.
So
we will be asked to do other sacrifices, okay? Every single one of us knows what sacrifice is if you live a Jewish life. We know this, okay? We may, I don't think we will ever be asked to do ultimate sacrifices. None of us is in a situation where we need to literally put our life or the life of our children on the line for anything ultimate. God,
but this is what you're saying now, and I do have to go, but what you're saying now is that is kind of proof of why that alternate, death and resurrection midrash caught on so strongly. And again, our listeners, may well know this. In the Crusades, it is like, it may be somewhat embellished, but it appears to be at least partly factual, not just a legendary story, that Jews did sacrifice their children to prevent them from falling into the hands of the Crusaders.
Sure.
And they wrote poems, and they, told the story of, Abraham did this once. We have been doing this over and over again. And we're recording this now the day after Kristallnacht, and so Shoah stuff is on our minds. And I think that one of the reasons that the Akedah is so central in our religion is that, for all the reasons that you said before, we really do understand, and some of us actually in more than metaphorical ways understand what it means to sacrifice your children. And our Israeli brothers and sisters who send children to the army in a way that American Jews typically don't, they understand it deeply. And so the death and resurrection motif is, I think, that it's not just that Abraham did it once and none of us ever have to do it again. It is that we may in fact have to do it again. And that's why I think that other alternative reading spoke to.
I want to add one thing here, since we're near the end. And that is, so Elliot, you want to stress the humanness of Abraham, and that you take him out of our own humanity, because we cannot be like Abraham in your reading of the story. He is greater than we are. And I, myself, prefer our religious heroes to be people that we can emulate, that we can identify with them and become them in some way, not intellectually, but on a human level. And that maybe that is the difference between you and me.
Maybe it is. I just, I've been, I guess, I remember.
No, it's very impressive what you did.
I remember a high holiday ad that the JTS put out, we're not all Michael Jordan, and I went to a concert recently. I saw this guitar player play, and I'm going like, this is unbelievable. All right. there is a phenomenon of human greatness, of excellence in certain ways that are not, it's not even approachable by ordinary people. Okay. And there's a certain spiritual greatness in Avram that is not available to everyone. Okay. Yes, there's a mythology that builds up in certain communities around the sainted people. And we can have a debate about that. And I'm ready to have a debate about that. But in terms of the Torah, in terms of an Avram, a Moshe, they're not attainable. They're different.
I'm going to leave.
You gotta go. Okay. So
right.
Thank you all for watching. Leave a comment. Take care.
Shabbat shalom.